Bonnie.
Hello. How are you?
How are you?
Oh, pretty good.
Good.
Stoplight on the way here,
I've been hearing that traffic's been bad the last couple days.
so.
Did you happen to get my message about bringing your...
Oh, I didn't. I guess I didn't get that.
Ken was saying you guys are having problems getting...
Yeah, and I don't know what it is because it's on his computer at home and mine. Either one of them, I can't open it.
Because Deb looked at the error message and said that it looked like you didn't have a PDF reader installed.
But at school, I send and receive PDFs all the time.
We'll have to get a hold of the computer and see, because everyone else is getting them, so I don't know what else,
Okay.
what else
Yeah.
to do unless I try to send them
Yeah.
as a different document type.
Yeah. What am I thinking? Tomorrow.
Maybe
Will you be in the office tomorrow?
we're not.
No. Oh, you're not in here at all?
Yeah.
Well, for Thursday night's meeting.
Here you go.
Thursday night's meeting, I will bring my computer with.
Yeah, and then Deb
Because
can
if
look
we can figure out why it's not on mine, it's probably
Yeah.
in this, because like my license for Microsoft Works and all of that is the same on both.
Got it. Yep.
You know, so if we can figure it out on mine, I probably can
Do the other
figure
one.
his, and if not, he can just use mine.
Yeah. Okay.
Because my computer's at home all the time, so.
Because then Deb can just take it and look at it when we're doing the meeting.
Meeting, sure. Okay, I will do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. No, I was gone most of the afternoon, so I didn't.
Oh, look. Number 1, Gugisman, it's the one on County Road 49.
Yep.
That's gonna be tabled.
Till October, yeah.
Well, we're gonna just table it
Table it
till a future date.
in case they're not ready in
Yeah.
October, okay.
And I won't say all this on the record, but yeah, you could just table it. They have to vacate, an Old County Road.
Yeah,
right away and
because a
sell
couple
it.
of trial sessions, luckily, she said, luckily we did some testing on this first. In order to,
It's not gonna end up being the October meeting anyway. Okay.
if I did it too soon.
That's where we're at.
And I'm gonna unmute myself and just check my sound.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, testing.
Can
You hear me?
Testing. I hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Somebody said they heard me, so.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, Sean,
Hi.
Mark, Jacob, Dennis. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
There's that. And
And I think too.
thank you too.
Reminder to board members to be using the new. Because I don't know if the numbers coordinate to the old ones or not.
Right. No, they wouldn't.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and Mike just asked that too. He's like, are we using the new findings tonight? I said, yep. So he was busy looking at his sheet. Grandkids were over. Used his iPad. It's dead, so he's coming in on phone.
Okay.
Blame the grandkids.
Yeah.
Oh, Dave. Do you have what you need?
Yeah.
Okay.
He may switch over to his iPad when it gets charged. didn't bring this.
What's that?
Oh, there it is.
Oh, got it? Okay.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm ready to go, so.
Okay.
I'm gonna shut this door. Are you muted?
What?
Are you muted or no?
Yes.
Okay, so that appeal, basically, did we tell them they have to plant 2 million trees or not? And if we did, we didn't say we're gonna propose it. That's kind of what it was on.
So, okay.
So, yeah, we said.
Dave, is that you?
Yes, it is.
That's what you guys get to decide.
Whether,
I'm here. I can hear you.
We, apply.
Good deal. Thanks, Dave.
whether we would.
Okay.
Staff.
Is there anything I should do with this?
What they propose.
Yes,
Okay.
so.
You should be fine just like that.
But that's really what it boils down to.
Okay, you're kind of echoey, but that's okay.
Good evening, and we will call to order the meeting of the Board of Adjustments for Monday, September 21st. I'd like to welcome you to the Stearns County Board of Adjustments public hearing. First, we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you are accessing us remotely, please put yourself on mute. I pledge allegiance.
We can't hear you.
There you go.
Okay, technical difficulty. Good evening and welcome to the Stearns County Board of Adjustments public meeting for Monday, September 21st, and we will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll start our meeting this evening with a couple of announcements. If you are, let's see, we can skip that part. All testimony this evening is being tape recorded for the record. If you're going to give us testimony, we ask that you give your name and your address before you begin to speak, and then go ahead and give us your testimony as soon as you're recognized by the chair. Members of the Board of Adjustment are appointed by the County Board of Commissioners with 1 member from each of the 5 commissioner districts, 1 member at large, and 1 member appointed from the Planning Commission. In response to COVID-19 and pursuant to Minnesota Statute Chapter 12 relating to the emergency management, Governor Walz has declared a state of emergency. In response to the state of emergency in accordance with Minnesota Statute Chapter 13D, .021, the Board of Adjustments members and the applicant may participate by telephone or other electronic means, and the meeting will be broadcast live. I'm going to give a brief overview of how the proceedings of our meeting for this evening. I will begin by reading the variance request, and that will open the public hearing. The applicant or the representative will then be asked to state their name and the address for the record. Environmental staff will provide us with a brief overview of the requested variance, the staff report, and if there has been any correspondence that has been received regarding this request. Then the applicant or their representative will provide any input, concerns, comments that they have. Once the applicant or the representative have provided their testimony, then the board will discuss the request and ask questions of staff or the applicant. When we have finished that, the board will ask if there is anyone else via telephone that would like to add comments to the discussion. If there is, we'd ask that person to state their name and their address for the record and then give their testimony. When all the testimony is completed, we'll ask the board members for a motion to close the public hearing. Once the motion has been passed to close the public hearing, there will be no further input from the audience, applicant or their representative, or environmental services staff, unless they're recognized by the chair because a board member wants some additional information or clarification. Our first agenda item for this evening will be continued until a later date, and that will be the request from Jody and Linda Gruingsman from Cold Spring, Minnesota. And that will be published as to when that application will be heard. So our second item on the agenda is to consider a request submitted by Steve Anderson, Albany, Minnesota, on behalf of Sandra Rosenberger, Avon, Minnesota, from Section 6.2.1P, Table M, of the Stearns County Subsurface Sewage Treatment System Ordinance 422 to place a septic lift tank less than the required OHWL setback from the OHWL of Linneman Lake, classified as a natural environment lake. The said ordinance requires that a setback of at least 100 feet from the ordinary high water level of lakes classified as natural environment for the placement of septic and lift tanks. The affected property is 2.72 acres of Government Lot 3, Section 27, Track 125 North, Range 30 West of Avon Township. The property address is 33129 County Road 50, Avon, Minnesota. And is Mr. Anderson the representative for the for our client here this evening? Are you with us, Mr. Anderson?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. And we will get back to you in just a minute. Could you please state your name and your address for the record?
My name is Stephen Anderson. My address is 38262 County Road 10, Albany, 56307.
All right, thank you. And we'll be back to you in just a moment. If staff could please give us an overview. First, before we go to that, if we could do a roll call on who was able to visit the site. Dennis?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean? Sean? Okay, and I visited the site. If we hear from Sean, we'll mark that down. If staff could go ahead and give us an overview of the application.
Dave, you're on mute.
Dave, could you begin again, please?
Yes. Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Knopfler, Stearns County Environmental Services. The applicants own a 2.72 acre meets and bounds tract between County Road 50 and Linneman Lake, classified as a natural environment lake. The single-family residential dwelling on the property was constructed in 1900 per the Stearns County Assessor's records prior to the adoption of the official control. The small shed was constructed in 1940 per the assessor's records. The detached residential accessory structure was constructed in 1984 with a variance from the county road and the ordinary high water level setback requirements, and with a construction site permit issued by Stearns County. The residential dwelling is a legal non-conforming structure. The current sewage treatment system serving the property was constructed at an unknown date and has a compliance inspection due to the septic tank collapsing. The SIP system is non-compliant per compliance inspection P-015671. The designer has submitted the variance application to place a septic lift tank 58 feet from the ordinary high water level of Linneman Lake. The proposed soil treatment area will meet the required setback from the ordinary high water level of Linneman Lake. The property is located in the Shoreland Overlay District of Linneman Lake, is not located in floodplain, and Linneman Lake is not on the impaired waters list. The subsurface sewage treatment system on the property is non-compliant per compliance inspection P-015671 completed on April 12, 2020. There are no reasonable alternatives to the requested variance due to the shape of the property. Avon Township, the City of Avon, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request, and we have received no correspondence concerning this request.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, could you please share with us any thoughts you might have?
This property's been here for, well, the owner's been living there for 46 years. And it's just that we can't meet the setback. The existing tank doesn't meet the setback. And to replace it with a new one, you know, we don't meet the setback. So that's why I'm here. And if we don't replace the current tank that she does have, she's not going to be able to use any facilities in the house in the near future.
Okay, thank you. All right, staff, board members, do you have any questions for staff or the applicant?
Madam Chair, a note and a comment, please. The note is in the compliance letter. There is a wrong date in there. I don't know if that needs to get corrected. It indicates that the installation and completion must be completed by February 21st of 2020. I assume that is 2021. And then a comment. These are the types of situations, I know we've discussed this before. I would appreciate if Environmental Services would take to the Board of Commissioners to automatically approve situations like this where there are no alternatives. And as I looked at the property, I would agree with that assessment. It doesn't seem right to put the applicant through this process for something that has no alternatives.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments from board members?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I'd just like to agree with that in that there's no other alternatives for replacing an existing failing septic system. So it is something that's really required for being able to live there. It's not something like building a new garage or things like that. It's something that really is required for living there. So I would just like to agree with Member Gregory.
All
right, thank you, and I'm sure staff can address that with the commissioners if it's possible to do that. All right, if we don't have any other questions, I don't believe we have anyone remotely waiting to speak to this one. So we're ready for a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Okay, we have
I second. Dave Gamrod.
and a second.
Bonnie, you were on mute.
We have a motion and a second. If there is anyone that disagrees with closing the public hearing, please indicate so. Hearing none, we'll mark that as the public hearing is now closed. We will go through findings. To place a septic lift tank less than the required OHWL setback from the OHWL of Linneman Lake, classified as a natural environment lake. Number one, the proposed use is allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located. And before we go ahead, just a reminder to board members to be sure to use the new set of comprehensive plans and goals and objectives that you received in the mail.
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I believe this is an R1 zoning district, and having a sewage sub-treatment system in an R1 zone is allowed.
All right. Does anyone disagree with yes for number 1? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number 2, the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls and any related ordinances, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, under the comprehensive planning goals and objectives for living, under Lakeshore Living Policies, number 7, create riparian standard that balance the interests of both year-round and seasonal residents while protecting the natural resources that draw them to the lakeshore amenities. So yes.
She just answered number 3.
Okay, I believe you would have answered number 3 under comprehensive plan.
I'm sorry. Yep, I was too excited to use the new ones.
All right, so we'll come back to number 2. We have a yes for number 3, which is the variance will be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Is there anyone that disagrees with yes for number 3? Okay, hearing none, we'll mark number 3 as unanimous yes. Then we'll jump back to number 2. The variance will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the official controls and any related ordinances. Yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, the ordinances require or find the most importance in a type 1 system, putting in a type 1 system and doing so in the best possible location. So I do think it is in harmony.
All right, we have a yes for number 2. Does anyone disagree with yes for number 2? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number 4, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, it's reasonable to want working facilities at your cabin.
All right, we have a yes for number 4. Does anyone disagree? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number 5, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner, yes or no?
Dave Gamrod, it's unique to the property for the shape and size of the lot.
All right, we have a yes for number 5. Does anyone disagree? Hearing none, we'll mark it as unanimous yes. Number 6, the variance if granted maintains the essential character of the locality, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, the character is not going to change by adding a lift station.
We have a yes for number 6. Does anyone disagree? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, economics was not part of this discussion.
So we have a yes for number 7. Does anyone disagree with yes? All right, we'll mark that as unanimous. We are ready to for a motion.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I would move that we approve the variance as requested by the applicant to replace the septic lift tank less than the required ordinary high water level setback from Linneman Lake.
All right, we'll do a roll call for the remaining.
I'm sure I'll second that.
Oh, thank you for catching that. Mike is seconding. Was that Mike? All right.
Yes.
So, Jill?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. And just for the record, previously when we were asking if you'd visited the site, we didn't hear a response from you, Sean. Were you able to visit the site?
Yes, I was.
All right, good. Then we can put that in the record. So hearing a unanimous yes, motion carries to place a septic lift tank less than the required setback from Linneman Lake. We will move on to agenda item number 3, and thank you, Mr. Anderson, for being with us this evening. We'll move on to agenda item number 3. Is to consider a request submitted by Marcia Borchert, Richmond, Minnesota, from section 6.2.1P of Table M of the Stearns County Subsurface Sewage Treatment System Ordinance 422 to place a septic lift tank less than the required setback to a structure. The said ordinance requires a setback of at least 10 feet from a structure for the placement of a septic lift tank. The affected property is lots 12 and 13 of Block 1 of Maryland Beach First Edition, Section 26, Track 123 North, Range 31 West of Munson Township. And the property address is 21059 Elk View Circle, Richmond, Minnesota. And Ms. Borchert, are you with us this evening?
Yes, I am.
All right. And if you could state your name and address for the record, and then we'll be back to you in a few minutes for your comments.
All righty. It is, my name is Marcia Borchardt. Address 21059 Elkview Circle, Richmond, Minnesota, 56368.
All right. Thank you. And if we can do a roll call on those visiting the site. Dennis?
I did visit the site, and I had a conversation with Marcia, mainly to identify exactly where that tank was located.
Okay. Dennis? Oh, excuse me, Jill?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I also was on site. If we could receive a report then from staff.
Dave, you might be muted again.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Knopfler, Stearns County Environmental Services. The applicants own lots 12 and 13, Block 1 of Maryland Beach First Edition that has a single-family residential dwelling and detached residential accessory structure on the tract. The residential dwelling, detached garage, deck, and retaining walls were constructed with valid construction site permits. The applicant purchased the property on April of 2020. As part of the sale, a compliance inspection P-015555 was completed in April of 2020. The system was installed in 2003 under SSTS permit 23-18493, consists of a 1,000 gallon septic, 500 gallon lift tank, and 464 square feet of pressurized soil treatment area. The septic lift tank at the time of installation in 2003 was installed less than 10 feet from the residential dwelling, as that was allowed by the sewage treatment system ordinance in effect at that time. During the compliance inspection of April of 2020, the septic lift tank were pumped out and the inside of the tanks were visually inspected for tank integrity as required. At that time, it was determined through the visual inspection that the compartment wall between the septic and lift tank had corroded and was not functioning as required. While this is not a compliance issue, it is being addressed to maintain septic system function and integrity. A design was submitted to allow for the continued use of the septic lift tank to be used solely as a septic tank and called for the installation of a new 625 gallon lift tank. The design calls for the placement of the new lift tank to be 7 feet from the residential dwelling. The property owner and designer have obtained permission from the adjacent property owner with the signed side yard property line agreement to be 1 foot from the property line. The property is located in the Shoreland Overlay District of Horseshoe Lake, is not located in floodplain, and Horseshoe Lake is on the list of lakes impaired for aquatic recreation and aquatic consumption. The subsurface sewage treatment system on the property is compliant per P-0155555. However, the license inspector indicated that the compartment wall had corroded, separating the septic and lift tank. There are no alternatives to the requested variance. Munson Township, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the Sauk River Watershed District, the Sauk River Chain of Lakes Association, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request. And the Environmental Services Department has received no correspondence concerning this request.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, do we have the applicant? Is there any comments you'd like to make?
No, I don't have no comments at this time.
All
All right, thank you. Then do board members have any questions for staff or for the applicant?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, just 2 comments. One is a repeat of the comment I made for the previous application. Again, I think this is an example of an application that we could not see in the future if the Board of Commissioners would address this issue. Second, wanted to thank the applicant. Even though the septic system is in compliance, they obviously have a concern about water quality, and so I appreciate that they're being proactive in this particular instance.
Okay, and I would like to agree with Dennis's comments, Bonnie Mossman. All right, any other comments or questions from the board?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, the only question that I had is, it looks like on the overhead parcel map that this would be right on the property line and the lot next door just has trees on it. Who owns the lot next door, and should we be concerned that this will be on the property line?
I believe there was there an agreement with
Yes, there was.
property owner? There was already an agreement with the adjacent property owner for the 1 foot setback.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, any other comments or questions from staff or from the board members? Hearing none, we're ready for to close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
Dave Gamrod, I'll close public hearing.
All right, and do we have a second?
Jacob Hawk, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do I have anyone that disagrees with closing the public hearing? We will therefore close the public hearing and go to findings. To place a septic lift tank less than the required setback to a structure. Question number 1, the proposed use is allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located. Yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I don't know that it says in here, but I believe it's R1, and so it would be an allowed use.
All right, does anyone disagree with yes for number 1? Mark that as unanimous yes. Number 2, the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls and any related ordinances, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I believe that the intents of the officials' controls are to give enough space between buildings and septic tanks. There isn't any space on this lot. They're fitting it as best as they can. So I believe that it is in harmony with those intent.
All right, thank you. Does anyone disagree with yes for number 2? Mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 3, the variance will be consistent with the comprehensive plan, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, the comprehensive plan under nature, number 3, to preserve, restore, and protect important natural systems and natural resources. I believe the applicant is, again, proactively doing that.
All right, we have a yes for number 3. Does anyone disagree? Mark that as unanimous. Number 4, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Mike Hayne, I believe the current use is a lake cabin, and to keep it functioning as that, I believe it's reasonable.
All right. Does anyone disagree with yes for 4? We'll mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 5, the plight of the landowner is due to the circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, again, the lot is very small and compact, and everything is fit very tightly on there, so it is the lot specifically that is causing this.
All right, so we have a yes for number 5. Does anyone disagree with yes? Mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 6, the variance, if granted, maintains the essential character of the locality, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, as Member Hayne just pointed out, this is due to the lot size. The neighbor has agreed to the 1-foot setback, so in those two things will not alter the essential character of that locality.
All right, thank you. Does anyone disagree with yes for number 6? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous. Number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations, yes or no?
Dave Cameron, economics were not in this discussion.
All right, we have a yes for number 7. Does anyone disagree with yes for 7? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes, and we are ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I would make a motion that we approve a variance as requested by the applicant to place a septic lift tank less than the required setback to a structure.
And do we have a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second.
I heard several, I believe I heard one from Jacob. So we'll have a second from Jacob. And I will do a roll call vote for the remainder. Jill?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Jake? Or excuse me, Dave?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So that is a unanimousness, yes, and the motion carries. And thank you, Ms. Borchert.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 4, is to consider a request from Midwest Property Solutions LLC, Paul Osborne, owner of Painesville, Minnesota, from sections 5.1.3 of the Stearns County Sewage Treatment System Ordinance 422, and from sections 9.10.10 of the Stearns County Land Use and Zoning Ordinance 439, to create a lot that does not have two soil treatment and dispersal areas that can support trenches, seeping beds, mounds, or at-grade systems. Type 1 systems as listed in the Minnesota Rule Chapter 7080.2200, and to create a lot in a commercial zoning district that exceeds the impervious lot coverage standard outside of any shoreland district. The said subsurface sewage system treatment system ordinance requires that there shall be at a minimum 2 soil treatment and 2 dispersal areas identified on a proposed lot that can support a type 1 system, and land use and zoning ordinance has a maximum impervious lot coverage of 60% outside of any shoreland district. The affected property is 4.72 acres. That part of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter, lying south of I-94, Section 16, Track 125 North, Range 31 West of Albany Township. The property address is 23218 350th Street, Albany, Minnesota. And is the representative for Midwest Properties with us this evening?
Yes, ma'am.
If you
Paul
could-
Osborne, 19016, 244th Avenue, Ainsville, Minnesota.
All right, thank you, and we'll be back to you in just a moment. If we can do a roll call on who was able to visit the site. Dennis?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I also visited the site. So if staff could go ahead and give us an overview of this application.
Dave, you're muted. Dave, you're still muted.
That we're not hearing you yet, Dave.
Dave, you're still muted. Now you're not.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
The applicant owns a 4.72 acre tract with a commercial structure located on the tract. Part of the structure was constructed in 1979 per the Stearns County Assessor's records, and a 60-foot by 120-foot addition was added in 2000 with a construction site permit issued by Stearns County Environmental Services. The subsurface sewage treatment system that serves the property at this time consists of holding tanks installed under Subsurface Sewage Treatment System Permits 01-19261 and 01-19262 in 2004. The applicant is proposing to plat the property into 2 lots per the preliminary plat. The proposed 2-lot plat consists of Lot 1, which would have the buildings, parking areas, driveway, and fenced storage area, approximately 2.39 acres, and Lot 2, approximately 1.75 acres, which is vacant. Approximately 0.57 acres would be platted road right-of-way. The current tract is under the maximum allowable impervious lot coverage of 60%. Lot 1 of the preliminary plat has approximately 72,029 square feet of impervious lot coverage, 69.2%. When the lot coverage calculations were completed by the surveyor, the fenced storage area was not included in the lot coverage calculations. This was confirmed by staff after contacting the surveyor. Lot 2 of the preliminary plat has no impervious coverage. The 4.72 acre tract has been altered by a previous owner to flatten the whole lot area. A licensed designer conducted soil observations on Lot 2 and has determined that most of Lot 2 has been cut, filled, disturbed, and compacted. The Stearns County Subsurface Sewage Treatment System Ordinance number 422 and Minnesota Rules Chapter 7080.2200 require that on all newly created lots, there shall be a minimum of 2 sites on the proposed lot that can support a Type 1 subsurface sewage treatment system. Because of the findings of the licensed designer, the only subsurface sewage treatment systems that could be installed and utilized on Lot 2 would be a type 2 system, holding tanks, or a type 3 system, which consists of soil corrections to meet separation requirements. The property is not in the Shoreland Overlay District. The property is currently zoned commercial. The subsurface sewage treatment system on the property consists of holding tanks, and the last compliance inspection was completed in 2009 and found to be in compliance at that time. The current impervious lot coverage is approximately 72,029 square feet, 35.1%. An alternative for the impervious lot coverage would be to move the lot line between Lot 1 and Lot 2 of the proposed plat so as to be at or below 60% impervious lot coverage on Lot 1. Albany Township, the City of Albany, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request, and we have received no correspondence concerning this request.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Do board members have any questions? Or excuse me, we are now going to the applicant. Applicant, do you have any comments that you would like to share with us right now?
Nothing much further, just that literally, like I said, the lot was evidently graded off before I had purchased it unknowingly, and the septic tank would be the only way to be able to bring a business onto that property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do members of the board have any questions for staff or the applicant?
Madam Chair, Mike Haynes. What are the plans for that lot? Is it going to be for sale? Are you looking to expand your business, or what is the intent of that specific lot?
I currently have the total property for sale, and I just give options for either if I don't sell it before, if I get a variance, I'll be able to break it up and not have such a big chunk to sell at one time, or still it'd be sold together. But I would give them an option to build on that property.
Okay, additional questions?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong.
Yes, go ahead.
A question for staff. In the application, it said that the township variance meeting was being held on September 8th. Do we know what the results are of that?
Maybe the applicant could share that with us?
They have approved it anyway.
All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, I only heard, I think it was Dave talk. I didn't hear anyone else speak.
I believe did the applicant say that it was approved?
Correct, yes, it was approved with the board meeting.
All right, thank you.
And then another question I have for staff is, what options are there for sewage on the grassy lot area that's going to be a separate lot? Will there be the ability to have any kind of sewage? If it's not that kind, do they have options, or can it not ever have a building on it?
Dave, you're muted.
Well, Dave is muted, but I believe in the report it said that they could use either a type 2 system, which would be holding tanks, or a type 3 system, which would be soil corrections to meet the separation requirements. And Dave, if you could, comment on that if that's incorrect.
Madam Chair, Mark Loud, Environmental Health Supervisor. Since Dave is having mic problems, your interpretation of the report is correct. The allowance of not having a type 1 system as required is what he's requesting. The ability then would lie in him, the applicant, being able to install a type 2 system, which would be that of just holding tanks for any kind of structure that may be placed there. Or the other option would be a type 3 system, which then the soil that's there, the acted or unusable soils would need to be removed, replaced, and then a system put on top of that. So it would either be a type 2 or a type 3 system that potentially could go there.
And would I be correct that if this property...
Thank you, Jill DeLong, for one more question. I apologize. Part of the recommendations from staff was to have an engineered stormwater plan to be developed and implemented prior to the approval of the proposed plat. So question for the applicant, as it sounds like you're already trying to sell the property, are you willing to do an engineered storm plan to the property before selling it?
It's the first I've heard about that. I'm not familiar with what that would be or entail.
And can I ask just a tag-along question to that for staff? Would that be the responsibility of the seller, or if someone purchased the property, would that be their responsibility to determine that? And also to, I'm believing if they have an alternate septic system system, they would need to come back to the Board of Adjustments anyway to get permission for a type 2 or a type 3. If staff could let me know if that's correct or not.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Knopfler, Stearns County Environmental Services. The stormwater plan would be a condition of the variance if approved for lot 1. As for lot 2, they could, if the variance is granted that they don't have to identify 2 sites, they could do a type 3 system, which would be a soil correction. That would not require a variance. But it may require a variance for a commercial building if it's going to be on a holding tank.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Does that, Jill, does that answer your questions?
I guess I'm still not sure on, when the engineered stormwater plan is required for lot 1.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, Stearns County Environmental Services. I can address that. So as Dave indicated, lot 1, which would be retained by the applicant, is my understanding that there would be an engineered stormwater management plan required before the plat is approved. Because if the plat would be approved without that stormwater management plan, it may not be able to, they may need to use part of lot 2 in that facility. So it would need to be done before that. And if approved, then that the stormwater plan was approved, then we enter into an agreement, provided we get a work of materials list, a letter of credit that the applicant can install that at a later date. But we would need the plan first.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions from staff or from board members for staff or the applicant?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, just a couple of questions on the sewer system and then a couple of questions on the impervious surface. So starting with the sewer, since that's the topic, is it possible for these 2 lots to share a common sewage system, as has been done in certain residential situations? And so that question, and then a related question on the sewage system is there's a triangle, I guess it's to the east, I think, of the Midwest lot there. Who owns that triangle between the road and, because the lot 2 ends and there's like a little triangle in there. Who owns that?
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Knopfler, Stearns County Environmental Services. A designer would have to determine if it's feasible to do a joint system. I don't know if there would be an area on the property as a whole to do that. They may have to go to a neighboring property. As for the small triangle that's on the easterly end of the property, just by looking at it, my guess is that's owned by MnDOT.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, Dave is correct. I just looked it up on the map, and this area right here is right of way. So that would be either, it's publicly owned.
Well, the simple thought was, and the reason we're asking was whether or not that soil was undisturbed and whether or not the applicant could buy that property and then have a site they could put a type 1 system in. But I know that's beyond the purview of this board, but I just want to throw that observation out there. And then as far as the impervious surface, a couple of questions for the applicant. Two questions. One is, did you look at ways to reduce the impervious surface on lot 1 by turning some of the gravel or other impervious surface into grass or a pervious surface? And then 2, did you consider moving the lot line? And my rough calculations indicate you would have to move it by about 0.4 acres so that you would comply with the 60%. Were either of those solutions looked at or reviewed?
I was not aware of that anyway. That was needed or recommended, I guess. And that is possible to turn an area into grass.
Okay, thank you. Additional comments or questions? All right, is the board ready to close the public hearing?
So move.
We have a motion to close. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Does anyone disagree with closing the public hearing? Hearing none, the public hearing is now closed. We'll move on to findings. We do have 2 options. There are 2 items being requested. Would the board like to do the items on separate findings or as one finding?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I would prefer 2 findings. I think it's 2 very different topics, and I personally would find different conclusions to each of the topics.
Right, and I will agree with Dennis's comments on that. Any other thoughts on doing one findings or separate findings?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I agree to separate the 2.
All right, anyone else? All right, I'm hearing no other comments. We'll do separate findings. The first findings that we will do is to create a lot that does not have 2 soil treatment and dispersal areas that can support trenches, seepage beds, mounds, or at-grade systems. Type 1 systems as listed in the Minnesota Rules, chapters 7080.2200. Question number 1, the proposed use is allowed in the zoning districts in which the subject property is located, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, it's a commercial district, and the proposed use by the applicant is allowed.
Does anyone disagree with yes for number 1? Hearing none, we'll mark that as a yes unanimously. Number 2, the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls and any related ordinances, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I believe the general purposes of the controls are to create the best situation in order to have a sewage treatment site for a commercial zone. And it's from what the applicant has given us, they are doing the best that they can based off of how that actual land is. So yes, I think it is in harmony with the general purposes.
All right. Does anyone disagree with yes for number 2? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 3, the variance will be consistent with the comprehensive plan, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, under business for partnerships and local coordination policies, number 6, encourage industrial development within existing communities, including redevelopment of existing sites and filling of industrial and business parks. Yes, it is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Does anyone disagree with yes for number 3? All right, we'll mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 4, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane, I believe it's reasonable for the owner of the land to maximize the use of the land.
Okay, does anyone disagree with yes for number 4? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 5, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, the soil disturbance was not done by this particular landowner, and he appears to be, he did not appear to be knowledgeable about that disturbance when he bought the property. So it is due to unique circumstances.
All right, thank you. Does anyone disagree with yes for number 5? All right, we'll mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 6, the variance if granted maintains the essential character of the locality, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, this is a business district, and so it would not change the essential character.
All right, does anyone disagree with yes for number 6? Mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations, yes or no?
Madam Chair, I don't believe economics were discussed as this application.
Okay, does anyone disagree with yes for number 7? All right, we'll mark number 7 as unanimous, yes. And we are ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I would move that we approve the variance request by the applicant to create a lot that does not have soil treatment and dispersal areas to support a type 1 system.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second that, Mike Kane.
Okay, we have a second by Mike, and I'll do roll call for the remainder of the members. Jill?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. So motion carries on the findings for the first part of this request. Now, the second part of the request, we'll do findings to create a lot in a commercial zoning district that exceeds the impervious lot coverage standard outside of any shoreland district. Number 1, the proposed use is allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, it is a commercial zoning district, and the proposed use to split it into 2 lots that will both be commercial is allowed in that zone district.
We have a yes for number 1. Does anyone disagree? All right, for number 2, the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of official controls and related ordinances, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I do not believe it's in harmony. The general purpose and intent of the official controls is to protect water quality, and that going over the impervious surface area, I don't think we achieve that. We can ultimately do that through an engineered stormwater plan, but I also think the applicant has several other choices to include reducing the impervious area and or increasing the land area of Lot 1.
All right, we have one no for question number 2. Is there more discussion? Anyone else have a differing thought? So we have no for number 2. Does anyone disagree with no for number 2? All right, hearing no disagreement, I will mark number 2 as a unanimous no. Number 3, the variance will be consistent with the comprehensive plan, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, under Comprehensive Plan for Nature Water Resource Policies, number 2, recognize the relationship between land use and water quality and continue to support water quality improvements through land use plans and regulations. So I believe that it is not consistent with the comprehensive plan.
All right, we have one no for number 3. Does anyone disagree with no for number 3? Hearing none, I will mark number 3 as unanimous no. Number 4, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, the property owner wants to split one large commercial zone property into 2. I believe that is a reasonable manner.
All right, we have a yes for number 4. Does anyone disagree with yes for number 4? All right, we'll mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 5, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I do believe that this situation is being created by the landowner by their choice of where they made the lot line and the size of lot.
Okay, we have one no for number 5. Does anyone disagree with no for number 5? Okay, hearing none, I'll mark that as unanimous no. Number 6. We're hearing a lot of background sounds. Could you please mute if you are not speaking at the time? Number 6, the variance if granted maintains the essential character of the locality, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I don't think the variance request would change the essential character of the locality.
All right, we have a yes for number 6. Does anyone disagree with yes for number 6? Hearing none, we'll mark 6 as a unanimous yes. Number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I believe that it is involving more than economic considerations. It's not just the ability to sell off part of the land, but it's also use, the ability to have multiple uses on that land. So I believe it is more than just economic concerns.
Okay, we have a yes for number 7. Does anyone disagree with yes for 7? Okay, hearing none, I'll mark that as unanimous yes. We are now ready for a motion to create a lot in a commercial zoning district that exceeds the impervious lot coverage standard outside of Shoreland District.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I would move that we deny the request by the applicant to create the lot in a commercial zoning district that exceeds the impervious lot coverage standard.
All right, we have a motion to deny. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn, I'll second that motion.
Okay. We'll do a roll call. So we have a motion that's been made and seconded to deny. Jill?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Oh, I missed Mike. Mike?
Yes.
And I also am a yes. So the motion has been approved to deny the request to create a lot in a commercial district that exceeds the impervious lot coverage standard outside of a shoreland district. And if you have questions as far as what you can do from here on, you can check with staff via phone during regular business hours. Thank you. And we will move on to item number 5 on our agenda for this evening, is to consider a request submitted by Leon and Carol Wolf of Cold Spring, Minnesota, from section 6.2.1P, table M of the Stearns County Subsurface Sewage Treatment System Ordinance 422 to place a septic lift tank less than the required ordinary high water level setback from the South Fork of the Watab River, classified as a tributary river segment. The said ordinance requires a setback of at least 75 feet from the OHWL of river segments classified as tributary river segments for the placement of a septic lift tank. The affected property is 3 acres in the southerly part of Government Lot 4 and Lot 1, Block 3 of Watab Acres, Section 16, Track 124 North, Range 30 West of Collegeville Township. The property address is 29041 County Road 50, Cold Spring, Minnesota. And is the applicant with us this evening?
Madam Chair, this is Tim Haig, Watab Inc.
And could you state your address as well?
14234 Fruit Farm Road, St. Joseph, Minnesota, 56374.
All right, thank you. And we will be back to you in just a few moments to discuss this application. And if we could have staff give us an overview of the application.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Knopfler, Stearns County Environmental Services. The applicants currently own a 3-acre meets and bounds tract and Lot 1, Block 3 of Watab Acres that are combined to create a tract that is approximately 3.8 acres in lot area. The tract has a legal non-conforming single-family residential dwelling that was constructed in 1959 per the assessor's records prior to the adoption of the official control. The residential dwelling does not meet the required structural setback to the ordinary high water level of the South Fork of the Watab River, which is 100 feet. The current subsurface sewage treatment system was constructed at the same time as the residential dwelling and is in between the residential dwelling and the river. The applicants are proposing to replace the existing non-conforming subsurface sewage treatment system with a design that was submitted with the variance request. The design calls for a 1,500-gallon compartment septic tank and a 1,000-gallon lift tank in the approximate location of the existing seepage tanks, which is approximately 30 feet from the ordinary high water level of the South Fork of the Watab River. The designer did try to locate areas to place the tanks further away from the river. However, due to elevation and high water table, it is not feasible to place the septic and lift tanks in any other location. The property is located in the Shoreland Overlay District of Big Watab Lake and the South Fork of the Watab River. It is not located in floodplain, and Big Watab Lake is on the list of lakes impaired for aquatic consumption. The subsurface sewage treatment system on the property is non-compliant per compliance inspection P-016892, completed on August 5th, 2020. The alternative would be to replumb the residential dwelling to change where it comes out of the residential dwelling. Collegeville Township the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the Big Watab Lake Association, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request. And staff or the department has received no correspondence concerning this request.
All right,
Thank you. And I'll do roll call as to who visited the site. Dennis?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes, and I did speak with both applicants. They gave me a tour of the land and did indicate, which is also on the map, that they could not put a tank on the southwest part of their land due to the high groundwater.
Okay, Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I also visited the site. And I'll just make a general comment before we begin discussion that I am guessing that this would be similar to several of the other items this evening that we would recommend to the commissioners, that they consider that if places are deemed by the installer and the staff agrees that there's no feasible alternative, that it possibly could be a item that would be handled by staff. Okay, is there any other comments before we begin in regard to that? All right, then the applicant, if you have any comments that you would like to make?
Madam Chair, members of the board, the only alternative that we listed was replumbing the house, and it's really not a very feasible alternative. The basement is completely finished. This is a 1959 house where the intent was to, they really didn't care about the placement of the sewage treatment system at that time. Of course, now we're in a different environment, and we're doing the best we can with given the high water table situation and the sandy soils. So it's not going to be a very fun or easy job, but I think that we're taking reasonable precautions, and I think it's a good, solid solution for this challenging site.
All right, thank you. All right, if we have any questions for the applicant or for staff from board members. Well, hearing no questions, are we ready to close the public hearing? Would I have a motion to close?
So moved. Dennis Gregory.
Second, Mike Hain.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone that is not in favor of closing the public hearing? We therefore will close the public hearing, and we will move on to findings. To place a septic and lift tank less than the required OHWL setback from the South Fork of the Watab River classified as a tributary river segment. Number one, the proposed use is allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located, yes or no?
Madam Chair, it's R1 zone district, and this is allowed use.
all right, we have a yes.
We have a yes for number one. Does anyone disagree? Mark that as unanimous yes. Number two, the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls and any related ordinances, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, again, much like an earlier application, this applicant is moving the drain field away from the water, and it looks, at least in my view, to be as far away as they can possibly get and still have an operating system. And so I think it's very much in harmony.
Okay, we have a yes for number two. Does anyone disagree? We'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number three, the variance will be consistent with the comprehensive plan, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong. Yes, for nature, under nature goals, number 4, ensure the reasonable and responsible use of the county's natural resources, including land, surface, and groundwater, minerals, open space, wetlands, wildlife, and woodlands. I believe that they're respecting the surface and groundwater on the lot as much as possible in locating this new sewage treatment system.
All right, we have a yes for number 3. Does anyone disagree? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Question 4, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, as I noted before, I believe they're placing the drain field in the best possible location. So yes, I think it's using it in a reasonable manner.
All right, we have a yes for number 4. Does anyone disagree? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number 5, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner.
Madam Chair, I believe the topography of the land and the water tables and various factors prevent them from putting it anywhere else.
All right, so we have
a yes for number 5. Does anyone disagree?
You accidentally muted, Bonnie.
Oh. All right, we have a yes for number 5. Does anyone disagree? All right, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number 6, the variance, if granted, maintains the essential character of the locality, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, by replacing this sewage treatment system, the people who have lived here in this home, a residential home that's been there for 60 plus years, will continue to be able to be used as a home. So it will not change the character of the locality.
Okay, we have a yes for number 6. Does anyone disagree? All right, we'll mark that as unanimous, yes. Number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations, yes or no? I believe the need for the variance is due to health and safety concerns for putting in a safe septic system that also tries to improve the current situation. So I believe it is more than economic considerations. Does anyone disagree with yes for number 7? Hearing none, I'll mark that as unanimous yes, and we are ready for a motion.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I would move that we approve the applicant's request for a variance to place a septic lift tank less than the required ordinary high water level setback from the South Fork of the Watab River.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Mike Kane, I'll second that.
Okay, Mike, we have a second. So I will do roll call on the remainder of the members. Jill?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes, so it's a unanimous yes. Motion carries. We will move on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is consider a request submitted by Lawrence and Mary Muller of Palm Desert, California from sections 5.1.2A1 and 10.2.11A1A and 10.2.11A2 of the Stearns County Land Use and Zoning Ordinance 439 to increase the size and alter a roof line of an existing screen porch on a legal non-conforming structure that does not meet the required structural setback from the Clearwater Lake. It's classified as a recreational development lake and ahead of the established building line. The said ordinance does not allow for the expansion of a legal non-conforming structure and requires that additions or alterations of the structures are met the required structural setback of at least 100 feet from the OHWL of lakes classified as recreational development and to be placed behind the established building line. The affected property is 0.46 acres, being west 1,670 feet of the Government Lot 1, Section 6, Track 121 North and Range 27 West of Linden Township, and the property address is 989 Bellevue Road, South Haven, Minnesota. And are the applicants with us this evening?
Yes, we are.
All right, if you could state your names and address for the record, and then we'll move on to staff to do a report before we have you share your thoughts.
Mary and Lawrence Moeller, 989 Bellevue Road, South Haven, Minnesota.
All right, thank you. And if we can do a roll call on who was able to visit the site. Dennis?
I visited the site and I talked with Lawrence and Mary. We had a long conversation on the project. They were talking about how they're expanding by just 2 feet and were imploring us that it wasn't a lot of expansion. They also talked a lot about the weeds that they have in their lake and that they have those removed so they can have a boat navigation lane. And so they didn't think that any vegetation on the shore made sense since they already had weeds in the lake. And I think that was the extent of our discussion.
Jill?
Yes, and I also did speak with Lawrence and Mary, and Mary did mention to me that they are planning on adding the gutters that are suggested, and that one of the reasons why they want to change this roof is that the current roof on the porch is flat and leaks a lot, and so they want to replace that so it doesn't leak anymore and just make it look similar to a different part of the home.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I also visited the site and had similar conversations with the applicants that the other board members had. Okay, so we are ready for the applicant to share with us any of their, we are ready for staff to give us an overview of the application first.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Knopfler, Stearns County Environmental Services. The applicants own a legal non-conforming tract of record that is approximately 22,577 square feet of lot area. Excuse me. The tract has a single-family residential dwelling, screen porch, and deck that are legal non-conforming structures as per the Stearns County Assessor's records, were constructed in 1959 prior to the adoption of the official control. The detached accessory structure on the property was constructed in 1988 under conditional use permit 1988-05. The applicants applied for and received a construction site permit for a 16 by 30 foot addition on the existing residential dwelling on October 1st, 2019, that met the building line setback to Clearwater Lake. The applicants are proposing to replace the existing screen porch with a slightly larger 12 by 12 foot screen porch and change the pitch of the roof of the porch from flat roof to a gable and pitched roof. The existing screen porch is 10 feet by 12 feet per the assessor's records and is approximately 63 feet from the ordinary high water level of Clearwater Lake and ahead of the established building line. The proposed new porch will be no closer to the lake than the existing screen porch. It will be approximately 2 feet wider and go from a flat roof to a pitched roof. The property is located in the Shoreland Overlay District of Clearwater Lake, is not located in floodplain, and Clearwater Lake is on the list of lakes impaired for aquatic consumption. The property is in an R1 zoning district. The subsurface sewage treatment system on the property is compliant per compliance inspection P-014087, completed on August 14, 2019, and is sized for 3 bedrooms. The current impervious lot coverage is approximately 11.6%, 2,619 square feet. The alternative would be to replace to the existing dimensions as allowed by ordinance. Linden Township, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the Clearwater Lake Property Owners Association, the Clearwater River Watershed District, and property owners within 500 feet have been notified of this request. And we did receive a email today from John and Angela Fife at 935 Bellevue Road, South Haven, Minnesota. To whom it may concern, we are writing this letter to state our written testimony in support of the request for variance that has been submitted by Lawrence and Mary Moeller for property located at 989 Bellevue Road, South Haven, Minnesota. We would hope that you would grant their request to change the roof line and increase the size of their existing porch and deck. Thank you for taking our opinion into account when considering this request. Sincerely, John G. Fife and Angela S. Fife.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, staff, for that input. And Mr. and Mrs. Moeller, could you share with us your thoughts or concerns about your application?
We are planning to put gutters on the roof to have any of the water flow back away from the lake front. And we are looking at doing some more of a buffer as they recommended when they came out, the man from the DNR. And I guess that's all.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from board members for staff or the applicant?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, the applicant just mentioned a buffer. I would appreciate if they could clarify a little bit further what kind of buffer are they looking at and where would that buffer be located?
Well, we haven't made a definite plan yet. We would like to put it on either side of the dock. We have the dock kind of sort of in the middle. I think you can see on the picture there where the dock and the boat, the pontoon are. So we're going to look at some possibilities. I haven't really done a lot of research on it, but they did give us a couple of suggestions of places to go to put some wildflowers and the native grasses along parts of the shoreline. But we don't have a definite plan at this time.
Just one follow-up question, if I may. I realize you don't have a definite plan, but any sense of how far from the shore landward you would go with the buffer? How many feet?
From the shore to how many feet? I guess I know they recommended like 25 feet. And I think that's what he said. And I don't know, we haven't really gone down there and looked at it and measured it out. I mean, right now there's a lot of wild weeds, I guess you'd call them, along the shoreline. So it would probably look nicer if we had more of a designed look to it than just wild. We haven't done a lot on our shoreline. Normally, we were only here for part of the summer, but since retirement, we'll be here, the majority of the summer. So we have more time to kind of put into that type of planning.
I don't mean to, sorry, again, Dennis Gregory, I don't mean to kind of try and pin you down, but I'm just trying to get a sense of your reaction to the buffer plan. If I gave you choices of 10, 20, or 30 feet, is there a kind of a preference about how far out the buffer that you would prefer?
I would say 10 to 15 feet. I'm thinking of offhand about it. I mean, like I said, I haven't really looked at it that closely.
All right. Thank you for your patience with my questions.
Okay, are there other members that have questions or comments?
Madam Chair, Mike Kane. Just to confirm, you will completely rip off the existing screen porch and the 4x4s underneath it, replace all of it with new material up to code?
The entire porch and deck are going to be ripped off and replaced. So everything will be brand new, up to code.
All right, thank you. Other board member questions or comments?
Okay, hearing none, I believe we're ready to close the public hearing. Do I have a motion to close?
Funny.
All right, we have a motion from Mike to close the public hearing.
You made it.
Oh,
Okay, do we have a motion?
Muted.
You're now unmuted.
okay, it just keeps bouncing back and forth. All right. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing, please?
So moved, Dennis Gregory.
I'll second Dave Gamrod.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Does anyone disagree with closing the public hearing? Our public hearing is now closed. So we will go on to findings of fact. To increase the size and alter a roof line of an existing screen porch on a legal non-conforming structure that does not meet the required structural setback from Clearwater Lake, classified as a recreational development lake and ahead of the established building line. The proposed use is allowed in the zoning district in which the subject property is located, yes or no?
Madam Chair, the zone R1 and alterations and improvements are allowed in R1 zoning.
All right, we have a yes for number one. Does anyone disagree with yes? Number two, or that will be unanimous yes. Number two, the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the official controls and any related ordinances, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, the applicants appear willing to put on gutters and to have at least some buffer by the lake. And so I do think it is in harmony with the general purposes and intent.
Okay, we have a yes for number two. Does anyone disagree? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes. Number three, the variance will be consistent with the comprehensive plan, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn. In our nature of goals and objectives, when we look at water resource policies, this is clearly number three, to preserve watershed functions for high quality surface waters and recreational areas.
Okay, so you would be saying yes to number three?
Certainly.
All right, so we have a yes.
Managing the watershed function.
All right, so number three, we have a yes. Does anyone disagree with yes? So we'll mark that as unanimous, yes. Number four, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner.
Madam Chair, I believe it's reasonable to want to update and maintain your cabin, especially if you're going to be occupying it more often than you normally would.
Right, we have a yes for number four. Does anyone disagree? Number five, the plight of the landowner is due to the circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. Yes or no? Well, I would think that it would be that it is circumstances unique to the property because they are trying to replace a screened-in porch that is currently there. So they don't have a lot of choices as to where to relocate it to. So I would believe that it's unique to the property. Does anyone disagree with yes for number five? Then I will mark that as unanimous yes. Number six, the variance if granted maintains the essential character of the locality, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, I don't believe that altering the roof line of an attached porch will change the character of the locality.
And we have a yes for number six. Anyone disagree with yes? All right, number 7, the need for the variance involves more than economic considerations, yes or no?
Madam Chair, Dave Gamrod, I don't believe economics were part of this discussion.
All right, we have a yes for number 7. Does anyone disagree with yes? Hearing none, we'll mark that as unanimous yes, and we are ready then for a motion.
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I would make a motion that we approve the applicant's request for a variance to increase the size and alter a roof line of an existing screened porch with 2 conditions. The first condition is that they put gutters on the structure, which are directing the water away from the lake as they have proposed. The second condition is that they put at least 10 feet of buffer between the water and landward toward the house, at least 10 feet.
And can we maybe be a little more specific? It's 10 feet toward the house, and then is that the distance of the shore with the exception of the 10-foot or 25 feet that's marked on the paperwork?
Yes, so it's per the plan, but instead of 25 feet landward, I am suggesting at least 10 feet, but everything else, as suggested in the plan, would remain.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Jill DeLong, I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve with the 2 stated conditions. We'll do a roll call for the remainder of the board. Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I also am yes. So the motion carries to approve the request. Thank you for coming this evening. We will move on to item number 7. Item number 7 is to consider a request for an appeal submitted by Aaron Sandvig, St. Cloud, Minnesota, on behalf of Jeffrey and Amy Nelson, Cold Spring, Minnesota, of an administrative decision rendered by the Stearns County Environmental Services Department on a planting plan for the unauthorized removal of trees without a valid vegetation alteration permit issued by the Stearns County Environmental Services Department. The affected property is Lot 5, Block 1 of Alexander Point, Section 29, Track 124 North, Range 30 West of Collegeville Township. The property address is 27197 of Alexander Lane, Cold Spring, Minnesota. And I am aware that this item contained a lot of material for us to look through. But just to simplify what our task is for this evening, our task is either to uphold the request that staff made for the final plan, or to consider the alternate plan that was submitted by the Nelsons for restoration of the vegetation. So if we could, do we have the applicants present with us? And if they could state their names and addresses, and I believe we have the applicants and also another representative for them.
Correct. We're here. My name's Aaron Sandvig. I'm here with the Nelsons, and they're next to me, and I'll let them state their names.
Jeff and Amy Nelson, 7197 Alexander Lane in Cold Spring, Minnesota.
And could we also have an address for Aaron Sandvig, please?
Yes, 1015 West St. Germain in St. Cloud.
All right, thank you. And we'll be back to you shortly to hear your comments. If the staff member could give us an overview of this application.
Excuse me, this is Ann Hilt. I'm also a local property owner.
And after we hear the overview from the staff and we hear from the applicant, then I will ask if there's anyone from the public that wishes to make comments.
Okay.
And so you'll have your opportunity at that time.
Thank you.
But thanks for letting us know that you're out there. Okay, if staff could go ahead and share comments with us.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Dave Knopfler, Stearns County Environmental Services. Just going to go through the basic history from August 30th of 2018. There was a contract for deed to purchase the property. On August 5th, 2019, fulfillment of that contract. On August 13th of 2019, an application for a construction site permit was issued to build a 59 by 32 residential dwelling with a 39 by 27 attached garage and a 16 by 18 foot deck. That construction site permit was issued. On the permit, there were conditions. The removal of any trees or shrubs between the house and the lake shall not occur until a vegetative alteration application has been submitted and reviewed on site. On October 18th of 2019, the SS subsurface sewage treatments as-built inspection was completed. On February 19th of 2020, Environmental Services staff Nick Newman meets with Leroy Ludwig, Nature's View Landscaping, to discuss shoreland alteration options. Due to easement, very little can be altered. The construction berm must remain. Vegetation must remain between the lake and structure. Any removal would require an approved vegetative alteration application. March 10th, 2020, Environmental Services staff Jamie Lucas conducts re-inspection of the project for the construction site permit. Project has been started but not completed yet. May 28th through June of 2020, Environmental Services staff received multiple reports of vegetation removal from the subject property. May 29, 2020, Environmental Services staff Nick Newman conducts site visit of the property. A minimum of 53 trees of various sizes were removed between the structure and lake. Some stumps or removed trees may not have been visible. Silt fence was not maintained around the construction site as required in the conditions of the construction site permit, and no erosion control measures were in place. Burn debris and garbage was found in the shore impact zone. May 29th, 2020, Nick Newman called Brad Wershay Homes, building contractor for the project, to maintain silt fence. Wershay stated final stabilization would occur the following week, and the silt fence would be fixed. Obtained property owner phone number and left message. June 5th, 2020, Nick Newman met with Amy Nelson about trees removed, inadequate erosion control, and lack of silt fence maintenance. Silt fence had not yet been repaired. Nick Newman called Brad Wershay Homes, and asked why silt fence had not been repaired. Brad stated they were expecting a violation letter to be sent to them first before complying with the conditions of the construction site permit. June 2020, correspondence with Jason Selvog, Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District, about vegetation requirements to revegetate area. The tree removal area is approximately 0.5 acres between the structure and the lake. Determined reasonable number of trees to be planted based on adjacent vegetation cover, tree species present in pre-disturbance state. July 9th, 2020, mailed vegetation violation letter outlining violations and requirements to comply set forth by Environmental Services Department. July 24th, 2020, initial appeal request received via fax from Jeff and Amy Nelson. August 26th, 2020, official appeal submitted to the Environmental Services Department. And this is the letter that went out on July 9th, 2020 to Amy and Jeff Nelson, 27197 Alexander Lane, Cold Spring, Minnesota, 56320. Amy and Jeff. Environmental Services performed site inspections on May 29th and June 5th, 2020 after reports of unauthorized tree removal on the property. The site visit confirmed vegetation removal in violation of Stearns County Land Use and Zoning Ordinance number 439. Any tree removal on a riparian lot requires a vegetation alteration permit issued by Environmental Services when not part of a permitted construction or shoreland project. Trees must be replaced within the building setback area of the property. Some of the minimum requirements are as follows. A minimum of 85 trees shall be proposed and planted within the approximately 0.5 acres of areas where the trees were removed. The trees to be planted shall be representative of the relative densities and types adjacent to the area of removal. All of the trees planted shall be trees greater than 3 feet in height. This can include bald and burlap trees, containerized trees, and bare root trees. A minimum of 50% of the trees must be 5 feet in height or greater. Seedlings will not be allowed. Environmental Services staff will conduct annual inspections of the trees for 5 years from the time of planting to ensure the trees remain. Please submit a plan for approval to the Environmental Services Office outlining proposed placement and scientific names of all trees by August 15, 2020. An attached list of trees and shrub sources and vendors has been provided from the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District. The department will evaluate the proposed plan. A deadline for planting will be established upon approval of a planting plan. If you have questions about this notice, please contact me at once. Contact me at one of the numbers listed above. According to Section 2.7 of the Ordinance 439, Section 7.1 of the Ordinance 208, you have 20 days to appeal the requirements set forth in this letter. Sincerely, Nick Newman, Environmental Specialist, Stearns County Environmental Services. And Madam Chair, there has been some correspondence that was sent in by email. One would be from James Pohl of 27192 Schultz Road. Dear Dave, in regards to the letter and notification received pertaining to the address noted in the subject of this email, I am writing to you with my comments on this issue as you are scheduled to meet on Monday, September 21st. We oppose the appeal by Aaron Sandvik on behalf of Jeff and Amy Nelson. When the Nelsons built on the land, it was clear they either never looked at the Stearns County or Collegeville Township DNR bylaws, or they had total disregard for the preservation of this property and the beauty that comes with lake living. As a neighbor on the lake, and virtually everyone I have spoken with living on Big Fish Lake feels the same way. When the trees came down on the property, there was a big wow. The lake frontage was bare with no trees left. If you grant them an appeal and let them do nothing and preserve and restore this woodland lake, you will be setting a precedent for the remaining 20 or so lots. And then we did receive correspondence from the Big Fish Lake Association Board. from Mark Backus, the Vice President of Big Fish Lake Association. Dear board members and Dave, on behalf of the Fish Lake Association Board and several concerned property owners on the lake, we are requesting your consideration not to allow the appeal or changes to the restoration requirements documented by Stearns County Environmental Services for the property. Via the Stearns County website, information on shoreline environmental regulations and the required vegetative alteration and environmental permit status specific to this address, which is managed by the Stearns County Environmental Service, is available and indicates such permits were not requested by the property owner prior to the landscape work being completed. Our Big Fish Lake Association position is not to view these properties and comments from lake homeowners and assess if actions of the specific Big Fish Lake property owners are in line with township, county, and environmental regulations. Rather, to provide input supporting all Stearns County Environmental Services regulations, permits, county staff, site visits, and enforcement, and required resolutions be followed by all Big Fish Lake property owners. Via the Stearns County website, information on shoreline environmental regulations, specific Alexander property covenants, and current permitting is available, which is beneficial. However, leads to individual interpretation and assessment of the property owner's lot status. In this case, the Stearns County Environmental Service has confirmed the required permits were not obtained, resulting in the documentation of restoration requirements. We board members thank all of Stearns County Board of Adjustment for handling this appeal and allowing our input. The Big Fish Lake Association Board focuses to include all shoreland property owners in the preservation of the quality of Big Fish Lake for all to enjoy now and into the future. Thank you, Mark Backus, Vice President, Big Fish Lake Association Board. And I believe there's one more. And this letter is from Collegeville Township. Dear board members, Collegeville Township endorses Stearns County Land Use and Zoning Ordinance 439, Section 10.2.13, vegetative alteration that prohibits intensive vegetation removal on property in the shoreland zone adjacent to lakes. The Stearns County Ordinance 10.2.13, Part B, clearly states that shoreland alteration requires permitting. Collegeville Township follows the permitting and enforcement process as written in the ordinance. The property is in the Avon Hills Conservation Area, which has been identified as an area of ecological significance in Stearns County. As part of the Stearns County Comprehensive Plan, the Avon Hills area has been recognized as the focus of ongoing conservation and education efforts. Utilization of conservation practices, protection of scenic views, and cooperation with area residents have been identified as best practice policies. Collegeville Township is in the opinion that Alexander Point plat was developed with the importance of ecological preservation in mind. To this end, we expect that Stearns County to enforce existing permitting and restoration practices. Landowners making changes to their property in Collegeville Township are required to follow permitting processes. A summary regarding shoreline management is readily available and can be found here. In conclusion, Collegeville Township does not support the appeal filed by Aaron Sadvik on behalf of Jeffrey and Amory Nelson. Sincerely, Megan McNair, Chair of Collegeville Township Planning Board.
Okay, thank
Madam
you,
Chair, I
Dave.
believe that's all the correspondence that was received.
All right, thank you. And how we'll proceed from here is first I'm going to do a roll call of all those who visited the site. And then following that, we will have input from the applicant. And then following that, we'll have input from anyone else that would like to speak on this item before we have the board go into discussion. Okay, so roll call on visiting the site. Dennis?
Yes.
Jill?
Yes, and I did speak with both of the applicants. They gave me a tour of the site and pointed out the trees, and the concerns that they had were that they couldn't see how 85 trees, as the county is requiring, could fit there unless some of them were expected to die off after a few years. They have a plan to plant 60 trees. They want to still be able to reach the lake from their home. So they just had the concern of they did not think that 85 trees could fit in the area physically. Thank you.
All right, Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And I also visited the site. All right, we'll now go to the applicant and the applicant's representatives, if they can share with us their thoughts.
Thank you again. This is Aaron Sandvig with Nelson's. As Ms. DeLong pointed out, and I just want to stress, we're here specifically talking about a difference of 25 trees. The Environmental Services Department proposed 85, we're proposing 60. And I also want to clarify something. Some communication was sent to Environmental Services this afternoon, and that was because we received the packet from them Friday, and so we put together some new stuff. And I hope that you all have that. I see that somebody's pulling up, and that is a picture of the newest plan. So you may all have seen a previous plan which had some different species and had a slightly different layout. This plan that's on the screen right now is the plan that we're asking the board to approve. And that was, as I'll get into in a second, in response to some conversations with Environmental Services. First of all, the Nelsons recognize their mistake. They cut down trees without a permit. It wasn't a deliberate intent to flout the process or the system. They made a mistake. They thought that they were allowed to do more than they were allowed to do under their construction permit, and they didn't appreciate the need for the vegetative alteration permit. They recognize that now, and they own the responsibility for them making that mistake. I do think that they actually shot themselves in the foot, not just by having to be here in an appeal, but they've actually lost evidence that they had quite a few dead and diseased trees, which I think would substantially change the math here, were we to still have those trees available to them. So like I said, I think that they've created more problems for themselves in the long run, and they recognize that they made the mistake. It's not somebody else's fault. As I said, we're asking for 60 trees. That's different than what Environmental Services proposed with 85. A few reasons for that. One, as I've talked to Environmental Services, what they've told me is that they just chose a 16 by 16 foot space. That's what they determine a tree needs. That's despite the fact that there are a variety of species that would go in. They've just said that every tree needs 16 feet by 16 feet. That's not the case. Different species have different space requirements, but they calculated 16 by 16, the number of square feet fits into half an acre. That's how they came up with 85 trees. There's not a more specific plan there. They did say that they anticipate some are going to die. So it strikes me as though there is attrition built into that 85 proposal. And like I said, this doesn't account for individual spacing. We had a separate plan with 60 trees, and it was maples and apple trees. After presenting that, and that was what was originally in the packet that you all received last week, I believe, I talked to Environmental Services and asked specifically for feedback, saying, can you give us some insight into whether you would be okay with this plan, what types of things we could change? And the only thing that I was told was there are no oak trees here. So we went back to the drawing board, talked at some length with the landscaper and the landscape designer, and he came up with this new and modified plan that's on the screen. So this has got species that were recommended by the watershed, or I'm sorry, Soil and Water Conservation District. And so these are different species than were in the original plan. And specifically, it includes oak, and that was the one that Environmental Services pointed out to me that was lacking. And so you'll see that there are 15 oak in this proposed plan. Another thing that I discussed with the Nelsons is moving some of the trees toward the water. The ordinance specifically identifies shade over the water as being a critical component of any vegetative alteration permit process. And so we moved some of those trees down toward the water to provide more shade and to replace that shade. So my point in all this is, one, to highlight that this is the plan that the Nelsons are asking be approved by the board, but also to highlight that the Nelsons, although they made the original mistake and cut the trees without seeking the permit, they didn't do it deliberately thumbing their nose at anybody. They made a pretty big mistake, but they're trying to work with the county, with Environmental Services, to be mindful of the feedback that we've gotten. And I know that this process isn't set up to be kind of back and forth between the board and us, but the Nelsons welcome feedback from the board as well, because again, they're trying to do this correctly from here on out. I know that there were some local members of the lake community that wrote in. I understand there are probably some people on the call that are going to be speaking up later. The gist of the comments that I've seen are either from the association or the Collegeville Township Board, basically saying, you know, we support zoning ordinances, but they didn't provide any specific comments to this particular scenario. Others were members that live on the lake, and I don't know whether this is something that whoever's running the screen can show, but along with the new plan that I submitted earlier today, we provided some pictures of lake lots from people that had provided complaints previously. And I didn't identify them by name in the pictures that we provided, but they were individuals that specifically said, we dislike what the Nelsons have done and we want the board more or less to hold them accountable. The properties that these individuals have are much like what the Nelsons are trying to accomplish. They have attractive, well-manicured lawns. They have nice trees in their lawns. They're, you know, more high-quality species rather than prickly ash or buckthorn, which are specifically excluded in the ordinance as invasive, but some other less valuable trees. Those are the pictures I'm talking about. And if you scroll through those, you just see that there's a very, very low density of trees in these lawns. Now, I went on Google Maps and the county's GIS website, and I calculated the area from the home to the lakeshore for each of these different properties, and there are 3 homes. And I could calculate based on the size that was there and a combination of aerial footage and the pictures that we see here, and the tree density that these homes have are between 12 and 32, or I'm sorry, 14 and 32 trees per half acre. And I highlight that because what the Nelsons have proposed here is 60 trees. That's twice the most densely populated lawn area that any of these individuals who have complained and said, you know, we don't like the plan, we oppose their appeal. But I think what's going on is we've got a different set of standards that people are asking to be imposed. The ordinance, as we laid out in our original letter of appeal, allows for a view corridor, 50 feet, and it allows specifically through a permit process to remove 25% of the trees within that view corridor. Some rough math based on what the county counted when they came out there, or when Environmental Services came out, 53 trees. Take out 25%, that leaves 40 trees. Had the Nelsons gone through the proper process, had they gotten the permit, we anticipate that many of those 53 trees would have been not counted because they would have been dead or diseased. So there would have been fewer than 53 trees. And then you take 25% off and that's some number less than that. But nonetheless, there is, I think, a ceiling at 40 trees. We're not proposing 40 trees. I think that some of the people that opposed our appeal probably thought that we were sticking with 40 trees, but as I've highlighted, this plan has the Nelsons asking for the board to approve a plan with 60 trees. This is more than I think they would have ended up with had they gone through the permit process, and it's more than the density of what we see for neighboring properties. Just a few quick points and then I'll be done. But a few quick points on the physical layout of this property. I walked it today, and there are still a few large stumps, and I would say that these couple stumps that I'm thinking of are about 2 feet in diameter, across, and they were rotted out in the center. And so to my point about many of these trees having been dead and diseased, the larger trees that were on the site that were taken down were dead and diseased trees. So those would have come down automatically. They did keep the larger healthy trees. And so those larger, more mature trees have remained. So it was really just the smaller trees, which you can see in some of those earlier pictures. They're small. They got a couple inches of a diameter, maybe 6 inches, something like that. There were a lot of those trees. Those are primarily what came down. There's a big concern with the ordinances with runoff. There is a huge berm that goes across the front of the Nelson's property that is, if you're standing in it, I would say it's about 3.5 to 5 feet. I'm being told that it's 5 feet. I believe that. I was standing there and it was almost to my eye level. There's a large hill that slopes down and there's a low spot and then a very large berm. The pictures don't give you a sense of how high that berm is, but I walked it and it goes from one side of their property to the other. It runs the entire shoreline. And that is a picture of the berm. Again, these pictures don't quite convey the impact that that berm has, but I raised that because 100% of the runoff from the Nelson property is going to end up in a wet spot that stays on their property. It doesn't flow off into the lake. The only thing that would be flowing off onto the lake is anything that hits the front side of this berm, which is, give or take 8, maybe 10 feet. So I really don't think that runoff is a concern here. That leaves more or less the visual impact. And again, the Nelsons are planning on planting 60 trees. Unfortunately, it's not reflected in the newest plan that we proposed, but the trees will be, if not all, then many of the trees will be taller than the 3 to 5 foot minimum that environmental services was requiring. Many of them will be in the range of 6 to 10 feet. That was reflected in the previous plan. Obviously, I think obviously they'll be putting in grass, which will have a big impact on the runoff as well. So that's my comments. I welcome any questions, but I'm done with what we have to present.
Okay. Do board members have any questions for the applicant before we open it up to the public?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory. Couple of questions for the applicant. First, who pulled the construction permit and was aware of the conditions in the construction permit?
Mr. Gregory, that was Warshay Homes, was the general contractor for their home construction.
Okay. Who cut the trees down?
That was the Nelsons themselves, their family.
And the trees cut down while Warshay Homes was on site?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we open it up to the public?
All right, I believe we have one person on the phone that is waiting to add comments.
You're muted, Bonnie.
Okay, and you got 2 online, I think.
Okay. I believe we have 2 people online, and we'll begin first with Ann Hilt, who's been waiting to share some information with us.
Yes, I am here. I too had submitted a letter, but I'm seeing now in the other letters that were submitted, I was probably in error that I did not show my address. If you need that, it's 27134 Schultz Road. Neighbors of the Polies that had submitted a letter. And in that letter, I spoke about Mr. Sandvig's letter where he compared the properties and the amount of trees to other properties on the lake, which I stated in that is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned personally, because those other properties are not specifically a part of the Alexander Point development. When that area was developed, I personally was not a property owner. It was within my family, but not me personally. But it was my understanding when that area, which had been in a set-aside trust or whatever you call it, when that was revoked, the trust and the area allowed to develop, the area, the lake owners were assured that no clear cutting would be done, such as what the Nelsons have done on this particular property. So I obviously in that spoke about the opposing the letter. Within this, when I sent in that opposing the appeal, that specifically spoke about the Nelsons planting 40 trees. Now, Mr. Sandvik is talking about 60 trees being involved in it, which is quite different, obviously. If there's any concession to be made as another local property owner, if it has changed from the original amount that the county had asked for, I would ask that the tree requirements be differentiated in 3 to 5 foot height to, instead of looking at the height of the tree, looking at the diameter of the tree, which definitely shows greater maturity, that be changed if again, the board approves the 60 tree proposal that the Nelsons have now submitted. Within my letter also, I had shown some aerial views of the land that showed the density of the trees that were there. Again, this area being within a specific land development that again was approved, or the Big Fish Lake Association and local property owners went forward with okaying it through the board, obviously, with the idea that these lands would not be clear cut as this has been done. Something else that Mr. Sandvich had mentioned is the runoff. And yes, there is quite a large berm. And I just want some guarantees that that berm not be filled in to level the property in any way, because that will completely prevent any type of runoff from entering the lake and stuff. Also with me is another local property owner. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, this is Kathy Murphy, and I live at 27186 Schultz Road, and I live next to the Poley property. We were here when this Alexander Properties was being developed, and we did attend nearly all of the meetings at that time, and we were assured that there would be covenants put in place to protect the topography, the trees, and the wetlands in that area. I also share the opinion of Poley's and of Ann Hilt completely. And I'm really concerned that, you know, if as those properties are being developed, you know, what's then, if this is allowed to happen, what's to stop the other, I think there's 21 lots in there, what's to stop them from going in and just in properties?
Permission in the future.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Are there any others waiting online to address us?
Megan McNair, Collegeville Township Board.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
And I submitted our words in writing. It's the township's opinion that since they did not obtain permits to change the shoreland in the first place, which all of their neighbors did, and they did work with a contractor who should have been aware, so I'm not sure how that mistake happened, but regardless, we do not support this appeal, as it's not like they're appealing the process because they tried to do the right thing. They're appealing the process, and it's an after the fact permit anyway.
Okay, thank you. Staff, is there anyone else waiting to speak? I believe then we've heard from all of the community members. We will go back to board members if you have any additional questions for staff or for the applicant.
Dennis Gregory, a question for staff, and we may not have the right people on the call to answer this, but the applicant brought up that we used a kind of a standard number of 16 by 16 for each tree. Just wanted to get the comments on the validity of different tree canopies and how that may have made a difference in the calculation of the number of trees.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, Stearns County Environmental Services. I can comment a bit on that. As you probably noticed in looking at some of those aerial photos, it's very hard to determine what was there. This is a challenging part of the ordinance to administer, and so what we did is we consulted with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District, Jason Selvog. He is their tree specialist. And we gave him the scenario, and he indicated, as I have up on the screen, what would be a recommended number of trees. As for the number of 85, a lot of what's being stressed is 25% of the total is what you're allowed within the 50 feet. That's only trees that are of a certain height, a diameter breast height of over 4.5 feet. There's also 25% less than 4.5 foot diameter breast height. But it's very challenging to administer that part of the ordinance because, again, all the underbrush was gone, and so we were unable to determine what level of underbrush or smaller shrubs should be or could be planted. So that is what went into the department's determination on the 85.
Thank you for that explanation. And just a comment, if I may. The report indicated 53 trees, but the report was an estimate only because they could not see all the stumps, and so that 53 number was used by the applicant to come up with their potential number of trees that would have remained that were dead or diseased or the 25%, but it could have just as well been 106 trees that were on that lot. We don't know, because the applicant didn't follow condition number 6 on the building permit.
Thank you. Other comments?
Is it okay to address that last concern?
Yes, you may.
So I talked to someone in environmental services about that. It's correct that we don't have a precise count. And this gets back to something I said earlier, that my clients shot themselves in the foot, because we would be able to go out and count the exact number of trees, also determine how many were dead and diseased. There were pictures that were taken by environmental services. And if you look at those pictures, the grass is very short. So it's not a situation where there's a lot of tall 3-foot weeds or something like that that would hide stumps. And there were 2 spots where there had been fires, but if you look in those spots where there have been fires, you can still see stumps very clearly in those spots where there have been fires. And there was 1 slash pile, which admittedly could have disguised 1 or 2 or 3 stumps. And I don't know what you all are looking at. It's difficult to see these images here. I had submitted a separate set just to provide better clarity because the original digital images are a little better. But my point in stressing this is it's understandable that there would be 53 or 55 or 60 trees, but it wouldn't be the case that you would have 100 or 200 trees. That just the imagery shows there are stumps and they are spread out fairly far from one another. And if you look at the surrounding property, it wouldn't have had a substantially greater density than that 53. So while 53 is not, you know, gospel truth, that's the last and final number. We acknowledge that, but any number that would have been higher would have been marginally higher. And again, that's not taking into account any that were dead or diseased. There were plenty of them, but we don't have a way of providing you that number. So thank you.
Okay, additional questions from the board before we close the public hearing?
As a non-board member, am I able to comment on that last comment?
Yeah, we'll take one more comment and then we'll.
Okay. Okay.
And
state your name.
Madam Chair, there was a letter that wasn't read that was brought to my attention.
Can you give us a little more information on that?
Sure.
There are some letters that are part of there are letters that are part of the packet that was mailed to us ahead of time. So we may have received that ahead of time. Can you tell me what letter you're referring to?
Yep, it's there. It's from Alan Schmitz, who would be a neighbor to the lake as well.
And
I can find it in the packet I reviewed today.
Board members did receive that letter.
And we received the letters, a lot of, we all received those ahead of time to read. So we don't read everything into the record that we physically received because those will be part of the record in hard copy.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, is there other questions or comments from the board? All right, we're ready.
Dave Gamrod, I'd have one comment. Have anyone ever measured what this width of the viewing thing is supposed to be, like 50 feet or something, as far as I understand it? And that looks like a lot more than 50 feet.
Okay, if staff could clarify for us what the view corridor that's allowed is.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, Environmental Services, the allowed view corridor is a 50-foot max.
Okay, what is the corridor that's cut there at the present time?
I would ask the Nelsons if they could help with that question. It's far greater than that at this point.
We don't know specifically. Just with regard to the view corridor, I mean, again, my clients screwed up. And while their plan has always been to plant trees, they weren't doing this specifically attempting to create that 50-foot view corridor. They're trying to plant back into it. So I think the plan that we've proposed reflects that there would be greater tree coverage throughout that entire space.
Okay, thank you.
Madam
Chair,
Jill
DeLong.
Sean, and then we'll go to Jill.
I'm just curious. I'm looking for a response from Angie Berg about these newer details in their proposal and the figure of 60 and how she feels about that.
Madam Chair, Member Blackburn, so this plan just came to us recently. My understanding is that Mr. Sandvig talked to Nick Newman, and he's our soil land specialist who's been working on this project. I think as Mr. Sandvig indicated, there's little evidence of what was there. And so the Environmental Services Department is asking the Board of Adjustment to basically weigh all of the evidence that's been presented to you and determine if what they're now proposing at 60 trees is reasonable based on what you know.
All right, thank you. And now Jill.
So Jill DeLong, my question for staff is, it sounds like the Nelsons have drawn up and worked hard on and revised and are continually revising and continually working with the county to try to meet as much of the needs as they can. If we are to deny their appeal, where does that leave them? What kind of, what would their next step be where they're already making these landscaping decisions? What's the next step if we do deny the appeal?
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, Environmental Services, the next step would be for the county to likely initiate legal action, or the applicants could appeal the Board of Adjustments decision on upholding Environmental Services decision. And I would just like to state, and I was going to do this more in closure, but I think we might be at that point. So according to Minnesota State statute, the Board of Adjustment can basically reverse or affirm wholly or partly the appeal. And so it is the Board of Adjustment's option to reject the appeal entirely and uphold the decision, or it is within your purview to accept a plan or modify a plan that's been submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, just one more question. So it looks like the one that's on the screen right now, that's the newest plans, and that supersedes the plans that we received in our packet. Is that correct?
This is Aaron Samby for the Nelsons, and that was our intention in light of conversations with Mr. Newman in Environmental Services, trying to accommodate some of the concerns. And again, some of the additional concerns based on the ordinance that we saw. We wanted to provide something more to try and make up the difference, I guess. I mean, we're not going through the permit process, unfortunately. So this is the plan that we're putting forward most recently, yes.
Okay, and so then I forget what the term was that Member Gamrod said about the visual channel, or what was that?
Are you looking for the term view corridor?
View corridor, thank you. So if I'm looking at this plan, where is the view corridor here? Help me understand what that means with relation to this plan and these trees, please.
To be honest, I apologize, Ms. DeLong, was that question directed at us?
Anyone who knows the answer.
We created this plan. There's honestly not a view corridor put in place. Were these trees at their mature size, and then we were coming back requesting a permit to remove 25%. And Ms. Berg is correct, there's a 25% of larger trees and smaller trees, but the math works out pretty similar. We could guess where that view corridor would be proposed, but this doesn't have a separate view corridor. So this would be planted, fairly thickly throughout. And while this isn't specifically on the table, I anticipate that some years down the road, once this canopy has established itself, the Nelsons might come back and through a permit process at that point in time, request a view corridor if it seemed appropriate, but that's years down the road.
Okay, thank you. I think we're probably ready to move on to findings unless there's any additional questions. Now the
Madam
findings.
Chair, this is Dave Gamrod.
Go ahead, Dave.
What is the normal, if they plant 85 trees, what is the normal mortality in 15 years?
I would have to refer that to staff if someone there knows that.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, I don't have the answer to that question. That is something that we would need to consult with our Soil and Water Conservation District. We could certainly do that and add to the proposed 60 number based on a percentage mortality. That's just one idea.
Yeah. that would be something that I would be interested in, you know, if that was the final number. But I would guess if you start with 80 trees in 10, 15 years, you're going to end up with about 60. You know, depends on the years too, if they're dry or whatever.
And
That's all I have in my question. So thank
Okay,
you.
my thoughts on that is, I think that's a good thing for us to consider is mortality rate. I would hesitate, though, for us to put that burden on staff because we're certainly not going to ask somebody from the county to go out annually and count trees. I think that would be,
right.
You know, we can set I believe in the original county's request, or their original plan, they had that for 5 years they would go out and check that the trees were being maintained. Because usually if a tree survives 5 years, the likelihood of it surviving longer than that is pretty good. So we will move on to the findings.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I apologize. I know I keep interrupting. I'm hoping this is the last thing. I just wanted to address that last concern really quickly. The mortality was something that we discussed with the landscaper and the landscape architect to figure out what an appropriate density would be. And that's how this plan came about. The 60 trees and the spacing and the orientation of those trees was specifically to provide those trees sufficient canopy space.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to findings, or we'll close the public hearing at this time. So if I have a motion to close the public hearing.
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, so moved.
And is there a second?
Madam Chair, I will second. Dave Gamrod.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone opposed to closing the public hearing? Hearing none, I will mark that as a unanimous approval to close the public hearing.
Is that, excuse me, this is Ann Hilt. With closing of that, does that mean my questions or comments are no longer valid?
with closing the public hearing means.
You're muted.
With closing the public hearing means that we won't take spontaneous comments from the applicant, from staff, or from the public unless the board members have a question that someone would be able to ask or answer, and then we will address that specifically to that person.
Okay, because earlier you said I'd be able to make I'd have another opportunity to make a comment. My comment is, I'll just make it, is that if this appeal is granted to the 60 trees, I ask the board to require those trees to be larger in size than the 3 and 5 foot requirements in the letters that they had earlier submitted.
All right, thank you for your.
I'm just presenting that. You're muted again, Bonnie.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Bonnie, you're still muted.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there anyone opposed to closing the public hearing of the board members? I'm hearing none. We will close the public hearing is now closed. All right. The task at hand for us is to determine whether we will uphold the plan that the county put together, and primarily with the number of 85 trees, that all trees planted should be greater than 3 feet in height, with a minimum of 50% of the trees must be 5 feet in height. Seedlings not allowed, that environmental services would conduct annual inspections for 5 years. That would be the original plan that was submitted to the Nelsons from the county. Our task would be to either choose that plan, to choose the plan that is being submitted by the Nelsons, which refers to 60 trees, or if we have an alternative to either of those plans, we could develop a plan that would be different than that. So findings of fact, because this is an appeal, they sound very differently from our normal findings. So please address those 4 questions. The appeal requested is an administrative decision rendered by Stearns County Environmental Services Department on planting plan for the unauthorized removal of trees without a valid vegetation alteration permit issued by Stearns County Environmental Services Department. Question number 1 for us to discuss is, what is the intent of the zoning ordinance as it relates to this appeal?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, in my view, and I think based off of everything that we've seen, the intent of the ordinance is to keep a natural look from the lake side. So when you're on the lake looking landward, is to keep a natural look. When you have a landscape that's been completely clear cut, I think you ultimately lose that, and I think that's why that ordinance is in place. We never did determine, and it's not relevant necessarily to us, whether there's a covenant in place as well that would have prevented that activity. And so I think the intent of the ordinance is to protect that natural look of the lake shore.
And I believe, although.
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn, I would have to add to that it's also about preserving the lake shore and maintaining runoff into the lake shore from the property.
Okay, so we have 2 items to list under question number 1 is the natural view and the runoff and protection of the lake. Is there anything else someone else would like to add to our determination of the intent of the zoning ordinance?
Madam Chair, I believe
Madam
it
Chair.
also.
Jill and then.
Pardon.
Go ahead.
Jill DeLong, so I believe it would also be to have a contiguous environment for the wildlife that lives along the shores of the waterway as well. If you have trees that are contiguous along the whole shoreline, more animals can live in those trees and move throughout the property as needed.
Okay, that would be a 3rd item under that question. And Sean?
Madam Chair, Dave Gamrod.
Dave, thank you. You're muted. Go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead, Dave.
You know, it's kind of blatant that it looks to me like there's about a 100-foot wide corridor cut out of there. And I didn't measure it, but that's my interpretation. And if they were thinking anything of the rules and regulations, it wouldn't have happened. I think we should go with the staff's assessment of how many trees should be planted.
Okay. Well, let's take that comment into consideration at the end of the 4 questions when we're making our final decision. I think that's good information, to put into play there. So right now we have 3 comments under number 1 that the intent of we believe the intent of the ordinance is to protect the natural view, to protect the lake and lake shore natural environment, and the contiguous environment for wildlife. So let's look at question number 2 then in our findings is, what is the intent of the comprehensive plan as it relates to this appeal?
Madam Chair, I would point out under nature, the water resource policies, number 3 is to preserve the watershed functions for high quality surface waters and recreation areas and provide restoration for watershed function for impaired waters. Big fish is not necessarily impaired water, but it could be if it's not protected. I do appreciate, as the applicant pointed out, that there is a berm there, but there isn't any requirement that they maintain that berm unless we can, unless that would be a further condition by environmental services, but it's not in their letter. So the applicant actually would have choices there.
Madam Chair, Mike Kane. Under the natural goals of the county, number 3, preserve, restore, and protect the important natural systems and natural resources. I think the county is intent to have these plans in place to make it unified and have along all wetlands a natural buffer and between the lake and the properties, so you're not looking just at houses and vacant land.
Thank you. And just a clarification that I received from staff is that there is a requirement that that berm not be disturbed, although it's not part of this plan. There is a requirement that they preserve that berm. Also, I'd just like to mention to members, we did electronically here somehow lose member Jacob, and but we can still proceed because we still have 6 members, and hopefully maybe he can dial back in. But we do have 6 members present. All right. Any other comments for number 2? Then we'll move on. Yes, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Jill DeLong, also under nature goals number 4, to ensure the reasonable and responsible use of the county's natural resources, including land, surface and groundwater, minerals, open space, wetlands, wildlife, and woodlands. And so I believe as it pertains to this appeal, it's definitely with the woodlands, the wetlands, and the wildlife.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to question 3. What sections of the ordinance apply to the subject at hand? And I believe we probably stated that already in number 1, unless someone disagrees with that.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, so the appropriate sections of the ordinance, if I could offer for the board's consideration, would be section 10.2.13. That's our vegetative alteration section.
Okay, thank you. So we're on to question number 4. Has staff properly applied the provisions of the ordinance to the activity in question? Why not?
Madam Chair, Dennis Gregory, I think for the most part they have. I would offer a couple of comments. Again, these comments are only the changes. I agree basically with the staff's recommendation. One of the things that the staff did was assumed a canopy of 16 feet. The trees proposed in the alternative plan have an average canopy greater than 16 feet. And so, all of us have trees on our lots, and, if you put trees too close together, the canopies are just are going to intermingle. And so I do think that staff, while I understand their methodology, probably needs to take into account the mix of trees that are being proposed and look at that canopy. And so, I don't have the exact number, but I think there's something between 60 and 85 that probably makes sense with the canopy that are being proposed. I think also we heard it from a couple of different folks, and I think it's a good suggestion. Instead of a 3-foot minimum height, I think it should be a 6-foot minimum height. And so that we achieve that canopy much earlier in the process. So just throwing out a number, I think there should be 70 to 75 trees. I think the average canopy of what they propose should be 18 feet or greater. And I think the height should be 6 feet or greater. And the reason I proposed 70 to 75, I almost forgot this, is I quickly looked up on the internet what the mortality rate was and it indicates on the first site I found that there's a 10% in an area where you're taking care of the trees. If you're not taking care of them, it's much higher, like 30-some%. But I'm assuming if these are going to be on a lawn, that the mortality rate would be much less. So essentially, I'm getting 70 trees plus to, ultimately, if 60 is the right number, that will be achieved through mortality.
Okay,
Thank you. And also one of my thoughts was that part of the original proposal from the applicant included apple trees, and the canopy on an apple tree is not nearly going to be the same as a canopy, let's say, on an oak or a maple. So staff may have been taking that into consideration when they were looking at the 6-foot or 16-foot canopy. It's difficult to try to second guess what someone else's thinking process was, but that's one option.
Yeah, and I would agree, Madam Chair. And the current proposal, and I think it would be part of anything we do, is to have oak, birch, cherry, and maple. And I think that's, seemingly the right mix for the canopy that we're talking about.
And I would agree because I think that's what would fit with the rest of the area.
Hey, Bonnie, it's Jake. My internet went down, but just to let you know I'm back. So
Wonderful. We're glad you're there. Now, any other comments for number 4 before we make a decision to uphold, deny, or an alternate plan?
Madam Chair, just along.
Yes, go ahead.
So I guess I'm still trying to have an understanding of what it is that we need to do here. Do I feel like the staff did this work to their best judgment? Absolutely. In a situation where nobody can actually know exactly how many trees were there, they absolutely did their best. Do I feel like the applicant or the appellant, maybe the person who's appealing, is also doing their due diligence to repair their mistake? Absolutely. Do I feel that their supplied plan of how to remedy the situation is reasonable? I do. So I don't know. I can understand the anger of the neighbors and the people who lived on that lake at seeing all those trees cut down. But I don't know that I would want to move for the county to move towards litigation when it sounds like the person appealing it is actively trying to remedy the situation. So I'm not sure what it is that we need to do.
Okay, so the way I see it is we have 3 options. One would be to adopt the plan put together by the county, adopt a plan put together by the applicant, or devise another plan that we feel would be appropriate. So those would be our 3 choices this evening. I don't think it's really not about fault. It's not about whether the county acted appropriately in making a requirement for restoration, because I think everybody has agreed that there should be a restoration plan. So I don't think it's, we're not trying to punish or provide fault or anything, but just to come up with either the county's plan, the applicant's plan, or something in between.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn. I think I kind of lean along with Mr. Gregory there as maybe we adjust the number. We agree on a number because we have to. Maybe we can raise it a little bit and we give a little leeway and find some middle ground, something like 70 to 72. And if we raise that foot level, that height of those trees to get it up to 5-6 feet or so, I think that's a fairly good compromise.
Are you ready to make that into a motion?
I am.
Or is anyone ready to make a motion.
Madam Chair, the concerns that I have with this potentially proposed alteration to the plans are, I personally am not a landscaping professional. I could not tell you what the availability of trees of that certain size are. I just want to be sure that we're not going to be putting an undue hardship on the applicant for the type of trees and size of trees that might not actually be available or feasible to install without a huge expense. So I just want to say that out loud, that I am not knowledgeable enough to be able to go against these other professional landscaping plans to know what is possible.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion. The proposed plan had 60 trees, 15 of each variety. So the landscaper has indicated that that is an appropriate mix. There has been conversations with environmental services. So we'll assume that everybody's on board with that. I would propose that they plant 70 trees, that the average canopy of those trees is greater than 18 feet, and that the height of the trees being planted would be 6 feet or greater.
Madam Chair, Sean Blackburn, I'll second that motion.
All right,
before we finalize the motion, can we add into that motion as far as when this needs to be completed by? Do we want to add the additional points that the county had in as far as that the staff will conduct annual inspections of the trees for 5 years from the time of planting, to ensure the trees remain, and a deadline of when it needs to be done. Now, I mean, we are in August. I'm not an expert on planting trees. I don't know if that's a prime time to be, the middle of September. If that's a time that we can be planting trees, or if it's better to wait till spring, I'm not sure. So maybe we can give a greater leeway as to when it needs to be completed by.
Madam Chair, I have no idea what a reasonable deadline is. I would agree with your observation that probably now is not a good time to plant. And so I would be fine if we need a date to putting that date into next spring, but I would appreciate if staff has any input into that deadline.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, I would recommend June 1st.
Okay. So my motion is amended to include a deadline of compliance, excuse me, of June 1st, 2021.
Member Gregory, do we also want to add that they are not allowed to alter the berm at the lower part of the lot as well?
Member Hank, my understanding was that requirement already exists, that they can alter it, and so shouldn't have to be a part of our motion, as I understand it.
All right, thanks.
And I'm having acknowledgement from staff that is required elsewhere, so we would not need to include it into our motion. Do we also want to include the?
My seconding that motion still stands.
Okay, and do we also want to add in where?
Bonnie, you're muted.
Do we also want to add into that motion that environmental staff will conduct annual inspections of the trees for 5 years from the time of planting to ensure that they remain?
Ted.
Okay, this needs to be
coming from just members of the board.
And I had assumed that was still part of the letter, and so I was supportive of the letter with the change I had made. And so, yes, I think there should be the annual inspections.
Madam Chair, this is Dave Gamrod.
Thank you.
I think that in the circumstance that there was not the regard for the safety of trees, I think probably the inspection period should be spot checked up to 10 years to make sure that these trees do not lose their, prematurely go out of existence. You know, that
Madam
have
Chair?
that right to check it.
Just wait for just a moment.
Madam Chair, I could add on that if staff would be willing to check on every other year for 10 years to limit the amount of staff time out there.
Okay, let me check.
Okay, let me check with staff about the feasibility of that.
All right,
Staff is indicating that that would be feasible to do it every other year for 10 years.
Mr. Gregory, would you approve that?
This motion is becoming quite long, but I think that's actually a very creative idea, Member Hain, and I gladly will add that to my motion.
Okay, so
we have the following motion, that they would be required to plant 70 trees, the 4 varieties that were indicated on their plan, 6 feet or greater in height. I'm using an 18-foot canopy distribution of the trees. The work would be the trees would need to be planted by June 1st of 2021, and that there would be an every other year inspection for 10 years from the time of planting. And the rest of what is in the letter given to them, that the trees could include bald and burlap trees, containerized trees, and bare root trees, with a minimum of 50% of the trees to be what we determined 6 feet in height or greater, and that seedlings would not be allowed. I'm reading from the letter here. So we have a motion and a second. I will do a roll call. So we have a motion from, was it, I lost track now. Who made the motion?
Dennis.
Okay, Dennis made the motion, and it was seconded by Sean. All right, then Jill?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Motion carries. If the applicant has additional questions about what is being required of them, they can contact the Stearns County Environment Office during business hours, and currently with COVID, it would need to be via phone. So thank you for your input. I'd like to thank all of the other people that came this evening to give input into this as well. Does staff have any other things for us this evening? Okay.
Madam Chair, Angie Berg, Environmental Services. So I just wanted to indicate that it does look like we do have another very busy month for October. The deadline was today. Today's Monday. And so just hold tight, and we'll communicate with the Board of Adjustment as to your wishes for 1 or 2 meetings. I would just like to publicly say that I appreciate all of your extra time and effort. You're doing a fantastic job, and this is a lot of heavy work. So hang tight, and we'll get through this fall.
And
I'd like to make one comment to staff that I really appreciated getting both packets before the weekend, this last weekend, because for both meetings this week, because it worked out really well for us to make one longer site visit day and do them all in one day instead of having to try to get 2 done before Thursday. So thank you for all the work in getting those out early. We appreciate it.
And if I may make one more comment, I've made some comments about the sewer systems this evening. I would also appreciate if staff would address with the Board of Commissioners the request for variances of feedlots and residences when those are owned by the immediate family members. Those are also variance requests that I think we could avoid. I don't think they result in any positive disposition.
And Dennis, I think if you're referring to like the setbacks, is that kind of what you're referring to, or?
Yeah, we have one coming up on Thursday as an example. It's a father-son, and they're building a house, and it's not 700 feet from the feedlot. I mean, if it's a father, son, brother, sister, I think we're going to approve 100% of those because we should. And we really could save the applicants and us a lot of time not having those types of requests.
And
having some insight onto what the planning commission has discussed. I know they have discussed a change in the setback for feedlots. I don't know if that's going to come to fruition with the new plan, but I know it's been discussed at planning commission.
Okay, if there's no other
questions or comments, we will adjourn the meeting for this evening, and we will see you on Thursday.
Hi.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job, buddy. That's a lot to keep track of. Holy cow. I think you guys did good work.
Now, one thing I'm wondering now.
Yeah.
Is there a way for them to, like this, I think it was this Ann at the end when we were discussing all this.
You gotta mute her.
Once we've closed the public hearing, to mute them, because we can always unmute if we have a question for them.
Correct. Yep.
That way.
I know. And the other thing that was happening is Megan McNair with the Township Planning Commission was chatting with the whole group.
Oh.
And so Deb stopped that right away. So I'll talk to Deb and ask her if she can, when the public hearing's closed. Hey Deb, we were just talking when the public hearing's closed. Can you mute them?
I tried.
And did she unmute herself?
She unmuted herself.
And she can do that?
Yeah.
In WebEx? Oh, you can't do the whole, because when I'm at the board sometimes it says you've been muted by your host.
Okay, but if I went to her.
Yeah.
And I muted her.
Yeah.
As soon as she chimed in or whatever.
And then.
Well, she chimed in, I muted her again. So I don't know if she was ready to say anything else or whatever.
Sure.
But yeah, I caught her.
Okay.
I mean, I had told her, after the public hearing, I said, the public hearing is closed, you'll have to remain muted.
She still piped in? Okay.
Well, I caught right away that wasn't Jill's voice.
No.
And so I knew it wasn't Jill making a comment.
Right.
Yeah, I was like,
oh.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But you can stop the chatting.
Yes.
Because that was
Yes,
helpful.
So like the next meeting, I'll just go through them all, except for staff, and I'll just say that you can only chat with me.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why if they have a comment that you think needs to be passed on to somebody.
Correct.
You could pass it on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
That's all
Sounds
new
good.
too, by the way. So
Is it really?
Either before it was turning all the chat off for any panelists or leaving it on. Because when we first started, I was checking to see who we could chat with and all that stuff. But with the latest upgrade, that came through. So
the mute things changed too, huh? I'll probably learn that tomorrow then at the board? Or will I be, no, I'll be a participant.
Right.
Like tonight, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I don't know if yours is set to update. We can,
I'll figure it out tomorrow.
yeah, it's interesting. I like the latest updates, so.
Yeah, go with it.
Yeah,
Are we leaving the pucks or no?
no, I need a
Okay.
puck.
said last week, after we get all this stuff figured out, we'll finally be in person.
Well, we are.
Yeah, we'll get it really working well. Knock on wood, don't say that. So far I'm teaching in person, so
Yeah.
I don't wanna.
We're scheduled to test the server too, so.
What's that,
We're
Deb?
scheduled to test at the service center too.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Good
Not
work.
looking at Brett, but
Well, right.
What's that? What about the service center?
That, it might be, we might be testing it soon. Thanks, Bonnie. Yep. Thanks again. Well, that went well.
It did.
I think so too. I mean, Bonnie did an awesome job. I told her that.